2022 is going to be an exciting challenge for the engineering group, trying to understand the effect of all those changes. Very big aerodynamic changes. The whole aerodynamic behaviour of the car has been reconsidered in the regulations to try and make them more able to follow closely, to give us better racing. We've also got very, very different tyres. So all of that needs understanding, and we can start that work here in Brackley on the simulator. But as I said, it's really trying to understand how the new cars will generate performance. We'll run them quite differently to the cars that we're used to. The previous cars were all very much an evolution. We also need to understand how the tyres will generate performance. What sort of regime do we need to operate those in terms of temperatures? How do we get best grip? And then the other big element is really bringing it together with the driver. How do we actually get the car balanced? How do we make it stable? How do we give them the front end they need? How do we give them the good traction that they're going to want? So those are all questions that we can start answering here on the simulator, but then also on the track. With such wide-ranging changes to the technical regulations, there's a lot of learning that we're going to have to do at the circuits. And when you get a new car, you're always learning, trying to understand how to get it in the sweet spot, how to get the drivers completely happy with the balance for that all-important lap in qualifying. But the learning curve here is going to be much, much steeper. We'll be finding real lap time, hopefully with every run, but certainly with every day of testing, we'll hopefully have moved that setup on a stage. And that's going to carry into the racing. So with every new track you arrive at, you've got to go through that process of understanding the limitations, working on the fine tuning. But there's going to be an enormous focus, especially in those early races, of trying to understand where that performance is, trying to get the car in the best possible condition to try and make us as fast as possible in qualifying and the race. The basic approach to the engineering around the race weekend is probably going to stay broadly the same, but one of the key elements here is, have we got good correlation? So have we got good correlation between the car on track and the wind tunnel? Have we got good correlation between the car on track and the models that we're running in our simulation tools, the model that the drivers are driving on the simulator here in Brackley? Now, if that correlation's good, then the work that you can do from away from the circuit is really valuable. You can start to understand the setup, start to do many more miles than we can possibly do within a race weekend. But as I said, the basic principles are going to remain the same. The big difference for 2022 is just how steep that learning curve is going to be. There'll be a lot more lap time difference between getting it right and getting it wrong. And that's why it's super important that we can start with good testing through the winter, try and build up our confidence in that correlation, and then carry those tools and deploy them into the race weekends. The race weekend format itself changes quite considerably. The purpose there is trying to give the teams less time to work on the cars, give them more time away from the tracks. And this is really coming from the fact the calendar is getting busier and busier. They're adding more and more races, and we need to make sure that we're not working people too hard. So the weekend starts later. The biggest changes are actually on the Friday, where the first session's at 2 o'clock and the final session is at 5 o'clock, running from 5 o'clock till 6 o'clock. And in Europe, the track's going to be cooling down at that time of day. And then you've got much less time on the evening. You've only got 3 hours where the mechanics will be working on the car. The teams will be allowed to stay in the offices for 5 hours, but actually that's still giving us quite a lot less time than we've normally got. And in that period, you're trying to get the car specification finalised. You're trying to collate all the learning from the running that day, trying to refine the setup and come up with the base setup that you're going to carry into Saturday and into qualifying. Once you're into Saturday and Sunday, the format's actually very similar. So, as I said, the big challenge will just be adapting to that new layout on Friday. It is possible we're going to have more sprint races in 2022. And those are an additional challenge. The key bit with a sprint race is you've only got 1 hour to get the car setup finalised, and then the next time you roll out of the garage, it's straight into qualifying. So that puts an awful lot of emphasis on getting the setup right to start. And with cars that we knew really well, that was a big enough challenge. Having a completely new machine to deal with in 2022 is going to make that challenge even bigger. Winter testing is going to be vitally important. There's only 6 days, so that's 3 days per driver, to try and really learn everything there is to know about these cars. There'll be a lot of work put into the correlation side, so making sure that the car that you've put out on track is matching all of those simulations. Have you got as much performance on it as you hope to have on it? And then a big element of trying to understand the tyres, and then in parallel with that, we'll be exploring different setup directions. So trying to get the cars into the correct working window, get them into that sort of sweet spot for the drivers so they can really attack the lap in qualifying. And doing all of those together in that short period that we now have for testing is going to be a big challenge. And the teams that get it right are going to be able to carry that learning into those early races, giving them an advantage. And being reliable is going to be super important. So more components have changed on these cars than in any year I can remember. And making sure that those new components are all functioning correctly, that you can keep the car on track, running, putting miles on it, learning with every mile, that's going to be absolutely vital. One of the big questions that the fans are going to want to know the answer to is, are these cars going to give us better racing? They should certainly be improved. A huge amount of effort has gone into these regulations, trying to mean that the car in front doesn't disrupt the airflow for the following car. That will allow the driver to stay closer, and the closer you can get, the more likely you are to be able to overtake. Now, will it make a track like Monaco an overtaking circuit? In reality, that's quite unlikely. The straights are too short, the track's too narrow. There really isn't any easy place around Monaco to overtake. But what we'll probably see at lots of the other circuits is that you can follow more closely, you can put the car ahead under pressure, it's easier to get within an undercut range, and importantly, there will be straights now where hopefully you can make a passing manoeuvre stick, whereas previously it wouldn't have been practical. So all of that, we'll start to get a flavour for it in Barcelona, in Bahrain, but really it will only be when the lights go out for that first race that we'll know whether this project has been successful in that very specific regard.